We're really, really happy to see you all here. I mean, a full house. Well done, guys. We showed up. Absolutely. So I'm not going to talk for long because you're not here to talk, you're not here to listen to me talk, right? You're here to listen to those council members. So we're going to move right through a couple slides here. If I can get this to work, one moment. There we are. All right, so tonight's schedule, I'll go through a couple announcements and an introduction, and then we'll have our panel discussion with several council members. We have Council Member Ajmera, Mitchell, Driggs, and Mayor Pro Tem Anderson joining us tonight. We did hear, unfortunately, that Council Member Graham and Brown could not be here, but we're really excited for the four that can. Then we will go into an audience Q&A, and this is your opportunity to talk directly to council members and ask them your questions that relate to equity and smart growth. And then after that, we'll have a little bit more networking. So that's an opportunity, again, to talk to folks around you about what we just learned, and then to talk to those council members one-on-one. So Sustain Charlotte, we are a local 501c3 nonprofit, and we advocate for smart growth and transportation choices. And what that really means is we want to make Charlotte a place that's easier to get around without a car. Not that we want to get rid of cars, that's not the case. We just want to make it easier and so that you have more options. If you don't have access to a car, if you don't want to be stuck in traffic, all of these sort of things. And you can see this is our staff here, and you'll see them around the room. So if our staff members can raise your hand, please, just so that people can find you afterwards. Thanks, we got several over here in the corner. You'll see them around tonight. And I'm right there on the end. My name is Hope. I'm the advocacy manager. And then really quickly, I want to give you a plug to become a donor. If you donate $10 or $120 for the year, you get one of these nifty t-shirts. And you can go right over there to our merch table, which is in the back behind the food. Chrissia, our development associate, is back there. You can buy raffle tickets from her, you can buy merch from her, and you can become a donor. We also have our Director of Development, Allison Rhodes, here tonight, who's right over here, who you can also talk to. Who you can talk to about becoming a donor. In our raffle tonight, we are raffling off 2 tickets to the Raptor Center, as well as a $50 gift card. So definitely buy your raffle tickets. We'll do the raffle at the end of the Q&A. You'll see there's different stands along each of these tables with information about the raffle, and you can buy those tickets, again, Cynthia over here at the merch table. All right. Another big thing coming, so mark your calendars. I want to see everyone get out their phones, pulling up that Google Calendar. April 24th, we have our Sustain Charlotte 12th Annual Awards. And this is a really cool opportunity to do a lot of networking with sustainable groups in the region and individuals as well, but also an opportunity to nominate people who you think are doing a really good job in our community with sustainability. So definitely take a look, go to sustaincharlotte.org/awards if you have someone you'd like to nominate. And importantly, Sustain Charlotte, our staff, does not contribute to the nominations, and we don't pick any of the winners. That is all completely members, so folks like you. So submit your nominations right there at that link. I also want to shout out what our advocacy campaign is right now, and I will put up the slide at the end of the presentation as well, so don't feel like you need to get that QR code right now. But we have launched a park and recreation budget petition, and this is an opportunity for people to let their county commissioners know that they care about park, greenways, nature preserves, rec centers, all of these things that go through the park and recreation system. And importantly, this is a county department, so the people who are speaking tonight are with City Council. They do not oversee park and recreation, so this probably isn't the best topic to talk to them about, but yeah. But the county commissioners are the ones you want to speak to. So again, this will be up at the end of the night. If you have any questions, please do come find me. All right. So since we're in a brewery on a Wednesday night, let's start with a little trivia. Yeah? All right. And shout out the answer as we go. How does Charlotte rank among the 50 largest U.S. cities for upward economic mobility of children born into poverty? Easy question. We start with the low ball. Nice. Yes, we are 50th. No, boo. We don't like that. But there is some good news. Recently, the author of this study, Chetty, recently came back to Charlotte and gave a quick presentation about more information upcoming that will hopefully change this number. More research is happening, but this is also something that really needs to serve as a wake-up call to us here in the Charlotte region. We need to do better for our citizens. One more. How much is Charlotte's population expected to grow by 2040?
A lot.
A lot. You're not wrong. Anybody else?
400,000.
400,000. Go up a little bit.
About $1 million.
There you go. Not 800, not 500, but 600,000 new residents. Yeah. And that is still a lot of people, right? That's over 500,000 people in the next 16 years. Where are all these people going to live? We already are in a crowded city. How are these people going to travel? Who are going to be our neighbors? And will we have enough water, healthy tree canopy, and clean air for everybody who's going to be coming here? So with that, I'm going to pass it over to our Director of Engagement and Impact, Nick Bethel.
Thank you. All right, good evening, everyone. I want to connect what Hope just shared with the issue of equity. So equity is really about making sure that everyone in our community has access to the resources that they need to succeed and have a good quality of life. This is a map of how the distribution of households in poverty has changed in Charlotte. In 2000, poverty was largely centered close to uptown. And in the ensuing decades, we've really seen a strong emergence of a pattern of the crescent and the wedge. So the crescent from northwest to East Charlotte and the wedge of South Charlotte. Now, this is a broad trend. It does not mean that there is not poverty in the wedge. It does not mean that there are not wealthy households in the crescent, but it is a pretty strong pattern. And related to that is a lot of lack of access to transportation choices, lack of access to affordable housing, and really a spatial mismatch between transportation choices and opportunities. So Hope shared that we are dead last for upward economic mobility. And the reason that that map is so important is that commute time is the single strongest predictor of whether a family escapes poverty. So as families are being pushed further and further from the center of the city, where those transportation choices and the sidewalks and the bike lanes and the high frequency public transit is most concentrated, it becomes harder for people to access opportunities. And this is from the Equity Atlas of the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan. And you can just see some general trends here. On average, higher incomes in the wedge, a much higher percentage of white residents in the wedge compared to the arc or crescent. And also, there are a lot of quality of life patterns that will follow this arc or crescent and wedge patterns. So again, these are based on averages, but they are really important to note because Charlotte has not necessarily grown it in an equitable way in the past. And I know some of you in the back may not be able to see this, so I'll explain it. This is a map of vulnerability to displacement as a resident. So the darker blue, the more likely a resident living in those areas is to experience displacement from their home. This is a map of proximity to grocery stores. And it's also sort of somewhat of a proxy to access to other daily amenities like medical care, education, all the places we might need to go in a typical day. And again, we've got the map of vulnerability to displacement. This is the map of sidewalk availability. And what you can see is the closer you are to uptown, the more likely you are to have access to good sidewalks. For much of Charlotte's history, a lot of our major roads that were built during the golden age of the automobile were built without sidewalks. And so we have a backlog of hundreds of miles of sidewalks that need to be built in Charlotte. And so tonight we're really focusing on equitable smart growth. As Hope said, that's all about building our community in a way where having a car is an option. It's not a prerequisite or requirement to have a great quality of life and access to opportunities. So it's all about making development decisions that are predictable, fair, and cost effective. And the city of Charlotte has, within the past few years, passed a lot of plans and policies. Some of the key departments involved in helping this happen are Charlotte Area Transit System, the planning department, and Charlotte Department of Transportation. So we'll just go through those really quickly before we turn things over to council. So the comprehensive plan was adopted by council in 2021, and it's really the vision for how Charlotte will grow in the coming decades. So there are 10 goals here. I won't list them all off. One of the most important from the perspective of our work is safe and equitable mobility and 10-minute neighborhoods, which means you can get where you need to go most days without needing a car, walking, biking, public transit. So again, we're talking tonight about equity through that lens of transportation and land use. There are, of course, many other forms of equity in terms of educational access, crime, environmental pollution, vulnerability to impacts of climate change, lots of different aspects of equity. So I just wanted to kind of set the framework tonight. We're really talking about transportation and land use. And council also passed the strategic mobility plan in 2022. And this is the plan for how people will move around Charlotte in the coming decades. And we recently heard from Charlotte DOT that if we continue to grow at our present rate and we continue our current patterns of driving, we would need to double our road capacity by 2040. That is not environmentally sustainable. That's not financially sustainable. So we need to, as our previous director of CDOT would say, we can't continue to widen our roads forever. We need to broaden our thinking about how we use our existing streets and street space, because it is our largest share of public space. And I'm going to turn things back over to Hope now to moderate our panel discussion. Also want to note that in 2022, Charlotte City Council passed the Unified Development Ordinance, and that was a citywide effort to update the policies and regulations that guide our growth and development in Charlotte. So the comprehensive plan is the vision. The UDO, or Unified Development Ordinance, is that main implementation tool to achieve that vision. And the strategic mobility plan is the transportation piece of implementing that vision. All right, so we're going to go ahead and invite up our panelists. Please join us. Everyone, let's give a round of applause for being here today. Love that they're so friendly. All right. So before we get started, can each one of you all introduce yourself and which district you represent? Starting with, let me help. No, yeah, okay.
All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Ed Driggs. I represent District 7 on Charlotte City Council. I'm in my 6th term. District 7 is the south part of Charlotte, Valentine. I chair the Transportation and Planning Committee, so a lot of what we're going to talk about is relevant to what I do. It's great to see you all tonight.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ajmera, your Charlotte City Councilwoman at large, so the whole city. Regardless of where you live in the city, I'm honored to represent you all on Charlotte City Council. Thank you all.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. My name is James Mitchell. I have the pleasure of representing you, Charlotte City Council at large, and that shutout was from Doug C. Thank you for allowing us to be here.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dante Anderson. I serve you as Mayor Pro Tem of the City of Charlotte, and I also represent District 1. And Tom is one of my constituents that I work very closely with. Thank you, Tom. And I'm in my 2nd term on council, and I was the vice chair of the Transportation Committee, and very much still a partner, Mr. Driggs, as it relates to transportation and planning efforts.
Council Members Mitchell and Mayor Pro Tem Anderson, would you like some water? Get you some water real quick.
Yes.
Yes, okay. We all. Oh, okay. You know. All right, we got that good for you. Okay. So to get it started, I have something really easy, something that's not gonna be, a bummer at all. As we can see from the comprehensive plan's accompanying equity atlas, many of Charlotte's residents still bear a much larger share of the burden of past inequitable decisions and lack of investments in Charlotte's built environment. One of the overarching goals of the comprehensive plan is to help Charlotte grow more equitably. What do you see as the solutions to growing in a more equitable way? Whoever wants to go first.
Okay, I'll start. We are working against history and market forces, and we are trying to use the resources available to City Council as effectively as possible to change our direction. It's a mammoth undertaking. We have limited authority to make regulations. We have limited resources. But what the plan embodies is an idea of diversifying housing types and populations in such a way as to achieve a kind of more integrated and harmonious community. That's the goal. What we're dealing with right now is the practical implications. We're now down to processing rezoning applications and looking in practice at what those rules we made actually mean. And we're discovering some difficulty, overloading our infrastructure, people who are upset about what some of the things that are in the rules allow. So I think we have a prospect ahead of us of a couple more years as we do our area planning and so on to basically fill out the framework that was created by the UDO and make it achieve our purpose.
So I agree with gentleman here, which is very rare. Jokes aside, the council adopted the Unified Development Ordinance last year, actually in 2022 now. Yes, it became effective last year, but there is still more work that we have to do. In order for us to grow, in order for us to grow equitably, we have to be intentional about our investments to undo the harm. There was systemic inequities that were created to remove barriers. So I want to give a shout out to Ed McKinney here, who is our transportation head. We are being very intentional about how we invest. So we had to talk about affordable housing, infrastructure such as transportation, sidewalks, and making intentional increased investments, especially in wedge area where there is a gap in terms of sidewalks, bike lanes, access to parks, access to quality infrastructure. So as part of our UDO, I think we are being intentional in addressing some of the inequities that have been created over decades and decades. So I hope as part of our mobility plan, as part of our strategic energy action plan that was adopted, we are being intentional about addressing infrastructure inequities that we see in our communities.
I agree with some of the things my council members have said. I think the very first thing we need to do is an acknowledgement that these inequities have occurred in a systemic way, right? So we have to acknowledge that the historical neighborhood of Brooklyn was decimated underneath the umbrella of urban renewal. We have to acknowledge that neighborhoods like Cherry and predominantly white neighborhoods like Chantilly as well were bifurcated through the establishment of independence, 74. So there are things that have occurred over the years that we have to acknowledge, and then we have to act. So the UDO is a great, it's a great tool for us, but we can't just rely on the UDO alone. So the city, we also have this program called Corridors of Opportunities, where we have identified these corridors that historically there's been disinvestment in those areas. I happen to have 2.5 of them in District 1. And so we're being very strategic in trying to address that, increase investment, not only from the city dollars, but tap into federal dollars and grant dollars, which the corridors program is a fantastic example of how we can do that. So we have to be strategic and do more of that as a matter of our practice, but ensure that as we develop policy moving forward, that we do so through an equity lens.
So this is difficult to go and last, right? Our your colleagues have touched on pretty much what you were going to say, and I totally support them. So let me tell you about two things that are dear to my heart. We talk about equity, and one is affordable housing. We have to continue to make sure that we allow affordable housing to be developed throughout our city. When you look at the current trends now, there's a lot of affordable housing units in District 2, 4, and now you're seeing a lot of development in District 1. And this is a city issue. And so we need to make sure that our policy recognizes affordable housing and make it part of a total mixed-use development. Number two is, for me, is small business. When you're thinking about how Charlotte want to grow, I always look at the nice cranes I see downtown, and I want to make sure all small businesses have an opportunity to participate in our growth. And with the crane, to me, what I would like to see council do is take another step further and start getting into workforce development. We still have a population that we need to assist through job skills and training, and to make sure they want to be productive citizens in the great city of Charlotte, we give them that opportunity.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you all hit on each very important part of this, specifically the UDO, which is going to shape how our city grows, right? And there's a lot of thought that went into this. This is not something that came up over the course of 1 year, right? This is several years of work and a lot of people's input. So I appreciate you all bringing that up and mentioning workforce development as well, because you're right, that's also key. So that leads me actually nicely into my second question, which is, council adopted the comprehensive plan to set a vision for equitable growth and then adopted new development regulations as the primary implementation tool. From your perspective, what is council's role in ensuring that the 2040 comprehensive plan and unified development ordinance, or UDO, help Charlotte grow equitably? What are you personally committed to doing during your time on council to help with their equitable implementation?
I'm personally committed to ensuring that no community is left behind. And the way we do that is by very measurable outcomes. So I prepared for this question. So really we focus on measurable results, such as auditing permits, incentives and projects that have said that we'll commit to affordable housing. We got to make sure that they deliver. We also got to make sure that when someone commits to having a transit access, that there is a transit access. Ensuring that there is environmental remediation and NWSBE contracts. So minority women-owned business enterprises be part of this growth to ensuring that no one is left behind. So I'm personally committed to doing that, and I take that very seriously.
We'd like to go next.
Oh, okay. I was going with it, but I shouldn't be. So I will be the first one to tell you, let me say a show of hands, how many have read all 663 pages of the UDO? Oh, Walter Fields, I should have known. Okay, Walter, I know why you're reading that. So let me share this with you. I was not as fortunate, Mayor Pro Tem and I were not fortunate. Councilmember Driggs and Councilmember Ajmera, when the discussion was going on about the UDO. I do think it's one of the toughest policy that council had to face. And you can tell by the vote, and Jill will correct me, was 6-5. And so it was a 6-5 vote. My role now, I have an opportunity to serve you, is to, one, get up to speed, but two, make sure there's no unforeseen consequences part of the UDO. And so let me state the obvious. It's not a perfect plan. It's a guide for us. I do think what you're looking for me and other council members is consistent leadership. And we take the practice of the UDO you still got to do what I call a homework. Go to the neighborhood meetings, go to the zoning meetings, and making sure we hear loud and clear for those who will be impacted directly based on our policy. I would tell you just a story that we all experienced. It was a rezoning in Lexington. Was that the top one, guys? It was a rezoning in Lexington. It was one of the first challenges of a UDO. And I think council, we heard from loud and clear from the neighborhood is, how do you take a large parcel to design your neighborhood? And based on the old, prior to June 1, it was conventional. Under the new UDO, it was by right. And we heard from the Lexington citizens that by right, we need you all to still engage with us and don't give developers just a, I don't know, I won't use the right word. Yeah, blank check, thank you, blank check. And so during the public hearing, we heard neighbors at the neighbors making comments. And I think all of us were sitting there and said, wow, we just implemented on June 1. And here we are less than 2 months later, there's a problem. Let me give credit to this council. We didn't just say, it's printed, it's in the book, we're not going to hear your complaints, let's move forward. We stopped and we said, we have to look at each rezoning individually. Let's do that. And we get that referred to the committee. And so now the staff, Allison Craig, is studying for the next 6 months. How do we make that policy better? So here's the message I'm saying to you. It's a guide, but we're flexible enough to hear your concerns and try to make it better.
Yeah, that's a great point. I do want to say, to answer the question specifically, what can we do personally? The first thing we can do is show up and be prepared, right? And that means doing your homework, understanding what are in these petitions, speaking to the developers and their representation, speaking to community members, going out to sites if you need to go out to sites, right? But there's a level of homework that must be done, and you all should hold every single council member accountable for doing their homework. Because even the at-large members, even though they don't represent a direct district, they have a vote on all of these petitions, right? And so everyone has to do their homework and be prepared. But what I do want to say, something that just caused me a little bit of consternation in my first term was there was feedback from the community that, you know, if I voted a particular way on an issue, and I had so many emails the next day saying I'm anti-UDO, but asking me if I'm anti-UDO. And unequivocally, I am not. But what I want all the residents to understand is that the UDO is a living document, right? And so there was a lot of work up front to try and get it right, but to Councilmember Mitchell's point, it's not going to be perfect. And so we're doing things like our community area plan, where you have direct feedback and input into what the UDO would look like in the future. And there will be amendments to the UDO. That doesn't mean that any of us are anti-UDO. What it means is that we brought this tool online to help guide us, and to comments earlier, there might be some areas where we didn't get it right and we have to tweak it. But that by no means means that we are trying to chip away at the UDO or make it go away. I don't think that is the intention at all. And so if I watched council meetings before I was on council, and so I'm sure some of you, I know you watch some council meetings. I know you watch some council meetings. I hope all of you aren't watching it, because I mean, I want you to have a life. But if you do pay attention, and especially in the zoning meetings, really good questions. We try to make sure that the community has a voice, and there's some things that are done just by default, but quite often, many times, we'll push to ensure additional community meetings, ensure that the community has a voice. And so I think the council is respecting the UDO and bringing it online the right way. And I hope that we'll continue to do that, and then we'll continue to do that over the lifetime of this term, next 2 years.
I should tell you a little about myself. I'm from the other side of the aisle. It doesn't mean what you might think it means. I think we have an agreement about the goals, and the purpose of the UDO. 5 of us voted against it because we had concerns about unintended consequences and well-intentioned provisions that were not going to turn out the way it seemed. My background is in finance. I am the chair of the committee, so I have a lot of sort of hands-on nitty-gritty responsibility. And my commitment is to make it work, to make it do what it set out to do. And I'll just give you one large-scale example. The UDO has as a central tenet that creating more housing increases the housing supply, and that slows down the rise in the cost of housing. When you look at that a little closer, what you see vulnerable neighborhoods getting invaded by development. A lot of mature neighborhoods and neighborhoods in more prosperous communities have HOA agreements and things that protect them from some of the provisions in the UDO that liberalize land use. So where's it going? It's going precisely to the places that we want to protect, and creating units that are not affordable units. So that's an example. There was a provision in there that said the community benefits agreement would shelter us from those outcomes. It turns out legally that is not actually enforceable. So what I've been doing with the planning staff, with the development community, is saying, if we do this, will you do that? Will you do that thing that we want you to do because we do this? We have built in provisions like in our TOD that say that people can have a little extra height. It's something we could offer. You could get more height on your building if you put money into a fund for affordable housing. Okay, that's a thing that works, and it has worked. I can tell you too, District 7 had a reputation as being hostile to affordable housing. We had an epic case about 10 years ago that some of you may remember. That is not the case. I have engaged personally to ensure that projects can get done. It's difficult down there because the land is expensive, but we're now developing city-owned land right next to a police station for affordable housing. The big new Valentine development has a couple of acres dedicated to it. A number of our market rate petitions have included a component of affordable housing as part of an overall deal. So we're using the leverage that we have to try to achieve the results that we set out to achieve, and at the same time guard against unintended consequences that work directly opposite. And I think we're going to get into transportation. We can talk about that a little bit in this context. But I can assure you, everybody here is on board with the purposes of the UDO and vision, the goals that we have in the city. We sometimes have differences of opinion about how it works.
Thank you. That was really informative, and it's good to hear that you're all on the same page in terms of the UDO and moving it forward, and recognizing that it's a living document that, right, as you get input from people in this room, we can make things work for the community. So I really appreciate all that insight. Which, thank you for mentioning transportation, because that leads me into my next question. And for you all up here, that means we're skipping number 3 because you all addressed it beautifully. All right, number 4. City Council adopted a new strategic mobility plan in 2022 and has identified a long list of projects that will provide more affordable transportation choices for those who cannot afford a car, operate a car due to age or disability, or simply choose not to drive. Yet the funding required to implement this plan far exceeds current funding available. Every year since 2021, the city has talked about the need for a sales tax increase to provide the needed funding, but every year it's been postponed until the next year. In fact, last week at your budget retreat, we learned that the tax won't be on the ballot in 2024, and now it will be 2025 at the earliest. Given the long overdue and urgent need for the investment in a more diverse and affordable transportation system, what will you do to move the sales tax effort forward this year? And what can residents do to help support council in this effort?
I should probably go first on that one. What happened was the city created a plan, a very large scale plan, $14 billion, all modes of transportation, very modern approach, informed socially and adopting a lot of the best principles. But then as we went to implement the plan, we learned a few things. For one, in order to get support from Raleigh and Washington, which we needed to realize the plan, we needed to have a regional framework. We could not just offer a Mecklenburg. So then we started working with the Central Atlantic Council of Government and their Connect Beyond plan, and we had a broad concept. What then happened was, because of the red line that was contemplated by the half-cent sales tax in 1998 could not be realized, there was some discord among Mecklenburg members of this planning organization. And it had to be completely unified in order to have any chance of gaining acceptance in Raleigh and in Washington. So we worked on addressing the red line problem, and that took 1 or 2 years, depending on how you measure. The commitment is still there, and I can tell you that I personally have traveled to Raleigh a number of times in order to engage with legislators on the subject of the funding requirement. They communicated to me, and on other occasions, they don't like the plan itself. They think there's too much rail in there. Very different climate in Raleigh, politically, and different mindset. So I said to them, fine, if you don't like that, understand Mecklenburg is important to North Carolina and mobility is important in Mecklenburg. Let's talk, let's figure it out. But that has proven to be, and I'm leaving out a lot of detail here, but that has been the thing that the work has been going on with, but that we couldn't solve quickly. And it's disappointing to me. I've also engaged with members of the business community because I was told by the legislators, we need to hear from your business community. We need to hear the transportation story as an economic and not just a social priority. And so there are many different levels on which the transportation story is compelling. But we are still kind of trying to achieve that integration with the legislature. I've also been to Washington a few times, and they've talked about the infrastructure bill money and how you access that, and what it takes to access that. And it was just more than we thought. I think promising a referendum as early as we first did was a little naive, frankly.
Yeah, I think.
Help us on the way.
Okay, so yeah, that's correct. Ed clearly hit all of the major points, which is accurate. I think I don't think we should focus on simply getting the sales tax on a ballot, right? I think what we need to do is ensure that we are doing all of the prerequisite steps to get it passed, right? And so right now, we need to focus on telling our story, getting the plan correct, and getting the authority to put it on the ballot. But then we have to educate so many residents who aren't in this room, right? And this is a jam-packed room. I'm so glad that you guys have a level of investment and eagerness around what's going on for the city of Charlotte as it relates to sustainability and transportation. But there's so many residents who aren't as engaged as you are. And so we have to tell our story. We have to tell that economic story so that they will vote when it is eventually on the ballot. And so that's what I think we need to do. Sometimes you got to go slow in order to go faster instead of just going fast, right? And then you give out of gas halfway through the race. And so I think this is a time for us to be strategic and measured. We just had a retreat last week, as you referenced, and we had some subject matter experts from other cities and counties to come in who have done major transportation transformational projects. And that was great because they gave us a bunch of really good detail and context. But one gentleman told us, in the late 90s, pretty much every city, every top 10, top 25 city had a transportation plan, and it was about building this robust rail system that was going to be a nexus across all of their cities. And like none of them did it, like 1% actually got some rail developed. So I know it feels like we are not succeeding, or perhaps we're not making traction, but it's a tough challenge. And all three of those experts were very happy to come and share their story with us. And they were so excited that we have a mobility plan, that we've thought about things like sustainability up front, because they've done this throughout the country and they've seen the cities do it without a plan and without thinking about what are potential consequences as it relates to the environment. So we've done a lot of great work. We have to continue to do that. And as we discussed at our retreat, yes, we're going to need to find those dollars, but at the same time, conversely, we can't just wait on that in order to move the needle as it relates to transportation. So we have to be strategic about the projects and prioritize them. Mr. McKinney's in the back. He's the expert there. You guys can go ask him all the questions, not us. But work will be done while we prepare to get this on the ballot. That's the message I would.
So your first homework assignment is to read Charlotte Mobility Plan. We all had a pop quiz at the retreat, also Ed, Professor McKinney. And so please read the blueprint. So let me just say a couple of things. I totally agree with my colleagues, and Councilmember Driggs has been doing a lot of heavy lifting on this, particularly in Raleigh. But I want you all to know, when you're in the 14th largest city in America, you're averaging about 110 people in the region per day. And the forecast, we will be almost 1 million people in population. We have to act now. We have to have a vision. So your council is not just sitting around and waiting. We understand our growth. What we need your help to assist us. What is the right growth for our city? What is the right transportation modes for our city to continue to move all these new Charlotteans and welcome them? I take this personal. I'm gonna tell you why. My youngest blessing said, "Dad, I'm moving to Washington, D.C." She's loving it. I'm on the metro. I got a metro pass. I don't need a car, Dad. You know, when Charlotte grows up, call me. Right? My oldest one is in Charlotte now, and she said, "Dad, we're going apartment hunting in going to look for an apartment in New York City in March." I said, "Why are you moving to New York City?" "Transportation, Dad. I'm trading this Lexus, and I'm moving to New York, and so I can enjoy a different quality of life." So personally, I'm upset as a dad who's a city council member in Charlotte. But I said it to say, we understand what we need. I think we understand what city we would like to become. We want you to engage with us and make sure we do it right. And make sure we start doing it now. This was a great time for us. Some of us saw the special 60 Minutes. I'm a 60-minute buff. And they had this story over the urban doom. Where other large cities in the United States are losing and their population is declining. And one of the reasons, cost of living, other reason is transportation. And one of the fortunate cities they bragged about, that Charlotte is moving in the right direction. Now we just got to prepare to make sure this growth makes our city even better. But we can't do it without you.
Yeah, please.
So that's a hard act to follow. But there was statistics that was earlier presented that showed how transportation is critical to upward mobility, especially when we are tackling poverty. Transportation plays an important part in that decision. As someone, our family, when we immigrated here, our family did not own a car for many years. We survived on public transportation to get to work, to get to college, to get to doctor's appointments, to go get groceries. So when I moved here from California, there was a culture shock. Because over here, you need a car to get around. So I'm heavily invested into this because as Councilmember Mitchell said, we are one of the 14 largest cities. We are growing at such a fast pace, but our mobility investments have not kept up with it. And Councilmember Driggs talked about how we are having certain challenges in terms of just the political landscape. And Councilmember Anderson talked about we are doing a lot more behind the scenes that often gets overlooked. We already have a plan that a lot of other cities do not. We have the mobility plan. We are pursuing federal dollars, grants, and opportunities. But I think what we can take a step further, we can make increased smaller investments that we doesn't necessarily have to depend on sales tax, right? As the budget committee chair, I'm going to advocate for making increased investments in our infrastructure, such as sidewalks, bike lanes, and we can do that now. We don't have to wait for our sales tax referendum authority. And we have high injury net in our city where there are multiple crashes happen throughout the day. I mean, throughout every hour. And we can address that now, not having to wait 2 years, 4 years, 6 years from now. Because there are people we are talking about fatalities that are happening every day. So we have a responsibility to make increased investment in our infrastructure while we continue to work on our longer term plan on getting sales tax referendum. So here I look to my colleague here on the other side, because certainly he's got more connections than some of us in Raleigh. And I'm glad that he's chairing our transportation committee. And as I chair the budget governance and intergovernmental committee where we work closely to figure out what kind of strategy that we need to put in place to build consensus. Because rightfully so, our neighboring towns are not on board. There have been broken promises. There have been promises that we have not fulfilled or delivered on as part of the previous plan. So I think we need to deliver on that. Because credibility is very important. We've got to deliver on the promises that we had made to our northern towns, Huntersville, Davidson, and Cornelius. And then we need to work, then we need to go to Raleigh to figure out how we get General Assembly's approval. But, you know, it is an uphill battle, but let's focus on 2 years. Let's focus on 4 year and then long term. So I would really like you all to come out to our public forum, our budget discussion. I know that some sustained Charlotte folks come to our budget meetings because that's where rubber meets the road. That's where we make investment decisions, infrastructure decisions. So I hope you come out and tell us what kind of projects, services, and initiatives that you would like council to prioritize in coming year. Because from February to April will be our budget deliberation. And that's a very important time frame for you all to come out and make your voice heard. Because I'm sure Sustained Charlotte does a great job. I often see Shannon, even Meg and Eric, who was actually in our budget 101 session just yesterday we had. And I'm sure they will be pushing for bike lane, increased investments in our infrastructure, but we need to see more of you as part of our budget discussion. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. And yes, we are coming for you all in the newsletter to come out with us, come to these meetings and tell council members all about what it is you want to see in your community. So with that, I think we want to hear from you now. We want to hear your questions. So we've got Allison here with the microphone. Meg is going to be taking over moderating, and then Eric is also coming around with the microphone. So if you have a question, please raise your hand.
Right, and one thing that we like to, if we could please keep one question per person, just because there's a lot of you here and we don't have that much time. Because trivia starts at 8, we need to make sure we can.
If questions need to be in the form of a question, please keep them brief. If you're directing it at a specific council member, please specify that. Otherwise, whoever would like can answer.
Hey, good evening and thank you. Because on the west side of Charlotte, we are. We need to.
Can you hold the microphone closer?
No, I don't want to be so loud. So I think back, I'm working back to when we courted Amazon's account. And what did they cite when they said no? Right? We were willing to throw how many names? Truckload of money at them. And they're like, so my question is, are there discussions with you internally, things that we're not privy to, where you say, all right, maybe go back to if you're from Charlotte or Parks Hills. And school, make them better, because then the people come and the town. So is that discussion ongoing? Question. In that balance of where is danger coming? Nobody wants to live here because now we can put the first in Atlanta for the statue. And I know there's probably what's in it for us, Charlotte getting, that's an uphill thing. But right, is there not some kind of balance in rehearsal getting these built that everybody wants to move to? The company will come and follow because the town.
So I will say that first on Amazon, I think most of us knew where they were going to go was pretty much preordained. Okay, I thought it was actually a little cynical that they asked 20-something cities to submit these detailed proposals, got a good look at our economic development programs. But in general, we communicate with a lot of the companies that advise corporations on placement and location investment. And so we have an idea of what their criteria, and they do want to see. They want to see greenways. They want to see the modernity of a city. The thing is, Charlotte gets a lot of credit for being that. They've had spectacular growth of millennials in this town because they think it's a happening place. We don't take that for granted, but the process through which we learn what we need to offer in order to attract those businesses is through communication with companies, and in particular those intermediaries that help companies decide where to go.
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit to what Ed said. He hit it spot on, but we are one of the fastest growing cities in the country because we have a lot of the criteria that companies look for when they decide that they want to move their headquarters or stand up a different outpost here. The state of North Carolina is number 5 in the country in business overall, and that's largely due to Charlotte and also the Triangle area. So I want to just make sure we're giving credit for the fact of what we're doing, but you're also right in that there's a balance, right? And that's, we talk about this all the time, and many council members recognize that it's an ecosystem. Right? We have to have good schools, we have to have a great airport, we have to have parks and green spaces in order to attract the talent, to attract the jobs. And then we also have to have workforce development so that there's a talent pool here, right? And so we do recognize that. When I answer your question directly, we do have conversations around tending to that ecosystem.
Yeah. As you measure the success of efforts, and not just government efforts, because a lot of this involves private sector. In housing, for example, you've got a number of Section 8 expiring agreements to be renewed, new affordable housing units being built, hopefully accessible because we're getting older and we need universal design. On the transit side, which is my field, it's not just bus, rapid transit and bus and rail. It involves the private sector potential for direct trips. How can people in the ARC get to industrial warehousing jobs? I have to look at it regionally rather than just the county. Can they, within 45 minutes, can they get to a grocery store within hopefully 20? Can they get to higher education, post-secondary education? Hard numbers. What data points are you looking at to show the intent of a new regional transportation plan or housing plan that can be used to evaluate success.
Look, no, that was that was a complex question and great question. I will say, the first thing I would say is many of us know if you're in transit to work, you're not getting paid, right? And that is, I think, one of the key crux of what you're talking about is if it takes you 45 minutes to get to work, guess what? That's an hour that you're not on the clock, right? If it takes you 2.5 hours to go through a spoke and hub system, that's 2.5 hours per day times 5 that you're not getting paid. Those are dollars that are being left on the table that can help move your family forward. So we all have to pay, all have to be cognizant of that as we build out our mobility plan. When you get to the point where you're talking about data points that we're looking at and measures of success, I had the opportunity to serve on the Central Line Board last term, and when I was the vice chair of the transportation committee, and organizations like Central Lineup look at exactly what you're talking about, right? So they look at what's going on in Charlotte, but what's going on in those neighborhood communities, and how is upward mobility taking place as it relates to increased income, as it relates to economic status, access to healthcare, et cetera. And so there's a data set out there. There's multiple data sets out there. UNC Charlotte has a phenomenal data pool, right? They have a data pool that we can scrub so much data off of, right? And there are organizations like Central Lina that look at exactly what you're talking about, and they release annual reports. You can go out on the Central Lina website and pull their annual reports. They'll talk about economic mobility across the entire region and what measures of success.
Yeah, but so in addition to what data points that Councilmember Anderson mentioned, also if you look at our 2040 plan, how many of you have read our 2040 plan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Show of hands.
That's great. Well, 2040 plan, we have 10-minute neighborhood concept. So really getting to the 10-minute neighborhood, getting to work in 10 minutes, going to grocery store in 10 minutes, that's really the ultimate goal here, because that does not only address our congestion and traffic issues, but it's also critical for our environment sustainability.
I'll be very quick, 30 seconds. That was a lot in that question. So number one, affordable housing, I think, and I'm speaking for myself, I think in order to continue the units 30% and 60% AMI, we need a higher affordable housing bond coming forward. $50 million is not going to do it. I've been a strong advocate with you. Secondly, we do measure, I had the opportunity to work with Ed on the transportation committee, and we looked at our bus route and how efficient is the system. And so that is one data point we're looking at. And last but not least, when we have our housing trust fund dollars, we do score them based on amenities. To your point, is it a grocery store? Is it a mixed use? Is it a nice restaurant? And so we do have data points to kind of address your questions.
Briefly, the question for the commute is not how far is it, it's how long does it take? And that's the mobility, right? That's the thing. I don't think we have enough data about that. I find it difficult to respond to your question, particularly because during COVID, everything turned upside down. You may have read stories about buses riding around empty and stuff. So we got to go back and recompute. We're now talking micro transit. We're talking about more efficient bus structure. We're talking about bus rapid transit. That is an ongoing thought process, but particularly in the context of the regional plan, getting the sort of rigor that you're suggesting, I find is harder.
I do want to be cognizant of the time, and our council members have been so generous in coming here tonight. So let's definitely have time for one more question. And then any council members that are able to are welcome to stay afterwards and chat with the audience.
She's also what your question more of a comment, right? So you guys have talked a lot about sidewalks. And it takes approximately a decade to build a sidewalk. It costs us about $4-5 million to build a sidewalk, right? So what I have heard today is enough aspirational about sidewalks. And I'm going to need the prerequisites of what is going to be done to build sidewalks, particularly in the university area, which is a series of enclaves, a series of neighborhoods that are disconnected from each other because of the lack of sidewalks. And thank you for being here. Please come to a council meeting and say that. I've been complaining for years that our resurfacing and sidewalks have been neglected, and it's a critical obligation of the city to maintain for safety and for convenience to have those sidewalks in those streets. So I absolutely agree. We need to do more of that.
Wow.
Okay, we're super quick, so let's do, Eric says, two super quick questions.
So I have a
Speed round.
super quick question. I'm a small business owner. We operate a farm. And I heard a lot of talk about affordable housing, access to certain things, to transportation. Are you all considering local foods and how to increase access to those communities who need it most?
Absolutely. So recognition that food deserts exist, in particular on the west side and other parts of the city. We have community members like Carolina Farm Trust that is focusing on decentralizing the food system, right, to get to those food deserts. So we are working on that. And I think we are going to put some added attention to that this time as we look at the budget.
Short answer, yes. Next question.
Hello, can you? Yes, hello. So basically, I just want to quickly ask, in your view, what does public transportation, or how does, or what role does public transportation play in ensuring equity? And then also quickly, does anyone actually take public transportation, whether that be the bus or transportation? Thank you.
I'll start and then Ed can finish up. So I personally feel like public transportation should be the great equalizer. So Brazil's one of my favorite countries to visit. And you go to the beach in Brazil and you can have someone who's a favela right there, right beside someone who's a millionaire. And the beach is the great equalizer in Brazil, right? I think public transportation should be that. It should be the first option. I need to have the option to take public transportation. Some might just fully depend on it. I had the pleasure of living in New York City for 10 years. I lived in Boston for 10 years. And I relied, some places I took public transportation, but it needs to be an option. But if done right, it's the great equalizer because it will allow you to get to the places you need to be, to live, grow, and thrive in the city.
Charlotte is 300 square miles, connecting every place with every other place, but the frequency and reliability that people need is a tough one. And that's why we have gone now to more micro solutions and trying to break it down a bit more so that there are ways that people are close to transit. We have projected the growth of the use of cars, and then we projected another line, which is how that growth of the use of cars could be slowed down by additional transit. But we need to just be understand that when we talk about New York and Boston and Washington, those places operate in a very different environment, and it's sufficiently dense to support, to sustain. I lived in New York for 7 years in the city, so just wanted to point that out. I think we're going to keep pushing for outcomes that give as many people as possible the ability to use. In fact, the our bus system is now envision my ride is being decentralized to where instead of having video routes, we have to go all the way up, down, back out again. There are nodes, and you can go to a place and then catch another bus to get to where you want to go. A lot of work going on there, very important for the city.
So you did ask the question, how many of us do we ride? So from 2005 to 2012, every Saturday, I used to ride the bus, go to North Lake Mall. And now on the weekend, I take the light rail and UNC to come to all the events downtown. So yes.
So when you go live, that means everything has been said, so I agree with everything that's been said.
Let's give our council members a big round of applause and share our gratitude for spending time with us tonight. And also let's give Town Brewing a big round of applause for hosting us. And we have this space until 8 o'clock. You're welcome to hang out. They're gonna do trivia at 8 o'clock. So then the public can come in, but if you love trivia, stay here.